Tumble me down, and I will sit upon my ruins, smiling yet. This is a quote from the poem To Fortune, written by Robert Herrick in the year 1648. Do you notice anything familiar about it? This is the first recorded instance of a colon and a bracket appearing next to each other in a context that could be a smiley face. Could. It was 1648, so it's highly unlikely that this was the intention. But you could still argue that this is the first ever use of an emoticon. Before computers, making faces wasn't really an issue. If you wanted to make a happy face, you could just draw a happy face. But a guy named Orson Welles once said, "The enemy of art is the absence of limitations." And what could be a bigger limitation than your brush being just a few select symbols? Even on typewriters, you could move and adjust the paper to place characters wherever you wanted. So making shapes and art of kinds was easy. But then we got computers. You can't move or adjust the paper on a computer, and you can't just draw whatever you like. You've got a certain amount of typable characters, and each one takes up its own spot in the text. Just writing though doesn't really convey your tone or your intention. And this was beginning to be a bit of a problem at
Carnegie Mellon.
There's no way it's pronounced like that.
Carnegie Mellon.
Mellon? At Carnegie Mellon University in 1982, where they were having issues on their teacher and student communication form. At this point, there was no real way to imply tone or emotion in a message made of text. So messages that were meant as jokes would be taken the wrong way and oftentimes lead to big misunderstandings. So a computer scientist at the university named Scott Fahlman had an idea. And on the 19th of September 1982, he sent this email. There's no way to truly know for sure, but this is widely considered to be the first smiley face ever on a computer. From there, this sideways smiley took off all over the internet, coming in all sorts of personalized shapes and varieties. There's a good chance you yourself might have even sent some kind of version of this smiley today. These evolutions and variations in the smiley face have all kinds of origins. For example, most people don't use the nose anymore. This is probably because it's more to type while conveying roughly the same thing, but linguist Vivian Evans argues that this actually represents a shift in usage to younger users. And I think he's right. If someone uses a nose in their smiley, I know they're probably like above 40. Emoticon standards and norms also differ drastically all over the world. The common happy face that all of us know has a colon and a bracket. But on the most popular Russian keyboard, called wait.
И краткое ЦУКН.
On this keyboard layout, the colon is the secondary key for the number 6 and is very rarely even used. So on the Russian smiley face, the eyes are dropped and it's just a closing bracket. Adding more or less brackets indicates how happy or how sad. This is something the Western smiley face has also kind of adopted. On Scandinavian keyboards, the brackets are directly next to the equal sign, so using an equal sign instead of a colon for eyes is a lot more common there. Now, one region I've been specifically avoiding till now is Japan. Japanese emoticons get very, very interesting. Japanese emoticons, or Kaomoji, were created completely independently from any Western emoticon. A couple years after the Western smiley in 1986, a deaf Japanese man by the name of Yasushi Wakabayashi, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, was browsing an ASCII.NET bulletin board, basically a very early version of an internet form. In formal messages or emails, even today, it's very common to leave a signature at the end of your message, most people leaving their name or some kind of alias. Wakabayashi, though, decided to, with the characters available, create a face. This seems like such a trivial thing now, but computers were still a very new thing at the time. Not a lot of people thought to create anything other than words on them yet. So instead of his name, Wakabayashi used this as his signature. And on June 20th, 1986, the first ever Kaomoji was sent. Probably. Obviously, again, the internet was a blossoming concept. There could have been other faces made by other people elsewhere, but this is generally regarded to be the first in Japan. Anyways, Wakabayashi started using this face in his other messages and in his usernames. Obviously, people began to notice this face, and as the internet does best, repost it. But a few were also inspired to create their own. They evolved and spread to become one of the staples of Japanese internet culture. You might notice that they're a lot more expressive and a lot more intricately designed than their Western counterparts. They're also upright and not sideways. I'm so used to this type of emoticon, I kind of forget that they are sideways. This divide in style can kind of be attributed to who created each one. Western emoticons were created by computer scientists for the purpose of communication, whereas Kaomoji were very popular amongst young people fashionable and pop culture, so they were made and influenced to look more cool and kawaii. Kaomoji spread throughout the entire Japanese internet and eventually to the whole world. As it spread, more and more regions started creating their own Kaomoji. For example, the Kirby-style emoticon with arms was created in the West. The Lenny face, one of the most iconic emoticons on the entire modern web, originated from a Finnish message board, Jelaluta. These kinds of emoticons I feel like are kind of works of art. To create something like this requires a lot of time spent finding the right characters and knowledge about how some characters work and how they display. The Lenny face is actually a perfect example. The two sides that make up the head are just two normal brackets, but the eyes, nose, and mouth are a feat of engineering. It appears to be just 3 different characters, but it's actually 6. In the Unicode standard, 2 characters can take up 1 spot if one of them is a non-spacing mark. The non-spacing mark character combines with the character that precedes it, and they both take up a single spot. So the eyes are actually an overarching line symbol called the combining double inverted breve, followed by a degree symbol. The overarching line is a non-spacing mark, therefore it combines with the character that precedes it, creating an eye and eyebrow in the same spot. The mouth and nose are made the exact same way. The mouth is a reverse version of the eyebrow, followed by the nose, which is actually a Latin letter inverted glottal stop, and that's how the Lenny face and all sorts of other emoticons are created. That was hard enough for me to wrap my head around. Can you imagine creating one of these things? It's an art form, one that I don't think gets enough credit. One Japanese site in particular is responsible for more of these works of art than any other. 2channel, also known as 2chi or Channel 2, was an anonymous text board in Japan created in 1999. It was a very controversial site responsible for many different things, but it is also the birthplace of a lot of the emoticons that we use today. Some examples include this guy, and the most popular of them all, this cat. You've definitely seen this cat in some way before, maybe even used him once or twice and thought nothing of it, but this cat has lore. His name is Mona. The name originated from the earliest known post of him, which had an ASCII art version of him and a message reading, "You people have too much free time," to which someone replied, "You too, because you made this whole big cat." In Japanese, you too is spelled omae Mona, so the cat character took on the name Mona. He quickly expanded to the broader Japanese internet as well, and eventually the whole world as a staple Kaomoji. I don't know if Mona's a boy actually also, I've just kind of decided he was. He even kind of took off outside the internet, and even has merchandise. He was one of the most popular on 2channel, but he's but a speck in the sea of emoticons constructed in the early 2000s. This is what emoticons were for a very long time. Personalized, expressive works of art. Until 2007. Emojis, as we know them, started around 2007, but they've actually been around since 1999 and originated in where else but Japan again. You see, back in the day, every language had a different way of translating letters to binary code. This is called encoding. Japan has a lot of characters, and because of this, they had a bit of extra room in their encoding, so adding a couple more symbols wouldn't really be a problem. So that's when Shikitaka Kirita said, "Hey non, why don't we put little pictures in our text encoding so people can send pictures without using the bandwidth it takes to actually send a picture?" It's a great idea, but he actually wasn't the first to have it. This is Shikitaka Kirita's original set of 176 emojis. These were the first on a phone and the first to really take off and be used in mass. But the actual earliest emoji that we currently know of came 2 years before these, on a pager from the company SoftBank. After their inception, emojis quickly became very popular in Japan, with different phone companies creating all different kinds of sets of incompatible versions. At this point, the set of emojis you had was tied to the phone carrier that you were with. They mostly stayed a Japan thing up until the Unicode Consortium. I talked a little bit about this before, explaining how the Lenny face works. The Unicode Consortium creates the Unicode Standard, a set of universal characters aimed to enable people around the world to use computers in any language. This is the encoding that almost every modern computer uses and follows. It cannot be understated how important and amazing the Unicode Standard is, and it's being updated all the time with new languages, symbols, currencies, and boost emojis, since it is an all-encompassing system that incorporates every character that any culture or region would ever need. They also had to include Japan's picture characters, and for a long time, Japan remained the only ones to use them, until 2007. No one really knew about emojis before this. Any regular person only knew of the existence of the characters that existed on their own physical keyboard, because that's all they'd really ever need. But on the iPhone existed a digital keyboard, and a different digital keyboard for all languages. So for Japan, they of course had to include an emoji keyboard, and no one really noticed, for a little bit, until they did. I remember when I saw my first one. I remember my friend Kyle sent me an email with these pictures of poos and happy faces instead of letters, and I was astonished. I was in disbelief. I was 9. I said, oh my god, how do you do that? How can I do that? And that's kind of how it happened to the whole world. It became this viral spread to everyone that used messages on the internet. And now we have emoji pants, emoji cups, emoji movies, emoji... Blah! They are a huge part of modern culture and a crucial part of how most people communicate digitally today. And that's it. That brings us up to today. I love emoticons of old. Their personality and creative expressiveness is just so charming. But today, emojis reign supreme. But language and text are always evolving. And not just Unicode. People are always creating new things too. New ASCII arts, even new kaomojis, even new things entirely. You never really know what people are going to create next. So for the future of emoticons and communication, I only have one thing to say.